The elders in the village often say that when you experience the following phenomenon in your dreams, you are halfway through a dream, suddenly it feels like something pushes you, then you wake up in a blur and fall asleep again instantly. This indicates that something behind you has pushed you, transmitting a kind of nerve that allows you to dream. It's as if you have entered its dream. Once the dream is concluded, it will push you to wake up. At this moment, your intelligence is like that of a baby, you shouldn't overthink but just desire to continue sleeping. Hence, if something appears at that time, you wouldn't have seen it. This is considered a good sign. However, if you open your eyes for more than 5 seconds, you might see things you shouldn't have seen. This is known as a ghost dream. One winter, I went to the city to visit a friend. Our home is far from the urban area, and I didn't leave until 2 p.m. It took a 4-hour bus ride to get there. Upon arrival and reaching my friend's doorstep, I found it unfortunate that the main gate was locked, and nobody was home. Assuming my friend had left due to an emergency, I decided to wait at the door. In the meantime, my friend called to tell me that about an hour before my arrival, his brother had called him about their father's sudden illness in the countryside, urging my friend and his family to go see their father immediately. Due to this sudden event, my friend couldn't inform me in time, and his whole family had gone to the countryside. Finding no one at my friend's house and with the sky turning dark, it was impossible to go back. So, I decided to find a hotel nearby to stay for the night and figure things out in the morning. Soon, I found a hotel about 500 meters from my friend's house. The hotel consisted of 4 two-story buildings enclosing a small courtyard of just over 70 square meters. Judging by its appearance, the hotel was built in the 18th century, no wonder it felt mysterious, austere, and cold as soon as I stepped inside. The hotel owner, a short and frail old lady, was very enthusiastic about my arrival, tirelessly offering tea and helping out. However, it was strange that since I entered the inn, aside from seeing this old lady, I hadn't seen any other guests. Puzzled, I asked her, "Grandma, this is such a large hotel, how come I haven't seen any other guests?" The old lady hesitantly replied, It's the off-season for tourism, there are fewer guests." Given it was winter, it made sense that there were far fewer passers-by than other seasons, so it seemed reasonable that the old lady's hotel business was struggling. I didn't think much of it, drank the tea, and the old lady arranged a very clean room for me to rest. Since I was so tired from the day's travel, I quickly fell asleep in the room. I don't know how long I slept, but I suddenly had a very strange dream. I dreamed of a woman with a big belly sitting by my bed, even slightly pressing on my foot. Then, she walked around my body and drifted away through the window. During this time, I was very scared and wanted to shout for the old lady, but no matter how much I shouted, there was no response from her. When I woke up, my arms were tightly crossed above my chest, and I was drenched in sweat, unable to fall asleep again. At the same time, I felt that there were ghosts in the hotel, afraid that the pregnant woman would come back. Managing to wait until dawn, I got up, paid the old lady for the room, and quickly left the eerie atmosphere of the hotel. When I told my friend about the strange dream I had in that inn, he told me the old lady running the inn had lost her husband in a car accident long ago. She had a daughter, beautiful as a flower, beloved by all. One year, a tourist man, claimed to be a scholar studying the local ancient architecture, stayed at the inn. Because of his profound knowledge, he often shared local history and culture with the girl, who idolized him. They quickly became close, and she became pregnant with his child. However, what the girl did not expect was that the man already had a wife. When he found out about the pregnancy, fearing responsibility, he disappeared without a word. Upon realizing she was deceived, the girl, heartbroken, on a dark and stormy night, while heavily pregnant, jumped from a second-story window of the inn beside her and died from the fall. Since her death, the inn began to experience hauntings, with guests dreaming about the girl with her pregnant belly causing disturbances. Afterwards, no one dared to stay at that inn again. Learning the haunted story behind the inn from my friend, I realized the woman with the pregnant belly I dreamt of that night was the old lady's daughter. I have a friend Edward who also experienced a ghostly dream. Edward had planted 2 acres of watermelons. One night, he went to check on the watermelons. The field was eerily quiet, and the night was pitch black, so dark it was hard to see one's own hands. Edward, being fearless of the dark since childhood, lay down on a mat at the edge of the field to sleep. Midway through the night, he dreamt he was marrying. Note, Edward wasn't married at the time, feeling that the woman had a perfect figure but her face was covered by a veil, making it impossible to see her face clearly. As Edward reached to lift the veil, it felt as if something pushed him, and he half awoke to actually find a woman lying beside him, identical to the one in his dream. Curiously, he went to remove her veil, but as it fell to the ground, instead of a human head, he saw a dog's head on the woman's neck. Terrified, he immediately sobered up, got up, and ran home as fast as he could. Later, he learned that a few days prior, a neighbor's female dog had accidentally consumed rat poison and died. The neighbor buried it at the edge of Edward's watermelon field, explaining the ghostly dream of marrying a woman. Speaking of ghostly dreams, let me share another ghost story with you. An elderly woman once told me about a supernatural incident related to dreams. She said, "If you dream of someone talking to you, do not respond casually, as every word you say might bring disaster, especially be careful with requests inviting you to follow them." She had a 5-year-old son, then in the 1st grade. One day after school, he went to fish in the creek at the edge of the village and was accidentally swept away by the river. At that moment, an old man named Henry who was passing by the creek saw him being swept away and immediately jumped into the river to save him. Unexpectedly, after Henry rescued him to the shore, he fell ill and died the next night. A few days later, in the middle of the night, she heard her youngest son talking in his sleep. She listened for a while but couldn't understand what he was saying. When morning came, she asked him, "Son, who were you talking to in your dream last night?" He answered, "With Henry." She asked again, "Which Henry?" He replied, "It was Henry the manure picker who saved me." She began to feel a sense of foreboding and asked anxiously, "What did he say to you in the dream?" Her son smiled and said, "Henry told me he's lonely in the river and wants me to keep him company." Hearing her son's words, she knew the deceased old man had visited her son's dream, and, deeply worried, she asked, "Son, did you promise him anything?" Her son nodded and said, "Tonight, I'll go to the creek to find him." Upon hearing her son's words, she tried to dissuade him from keeping the appointment and locked him in the house to prevent him from leaving. To her disbelief, he climbed over the wall and ran away after it got dark. By the time she found her son, he had already drowned in the creek at the edge of the village. Since then, her sanity was disrupted. She would tell anyone she met not to agree to anything a ghost says in a dream. In my childhood, I heard a ghost story about a well from my grandfather. He told me that people in our village were once very poor, with living conditions so severe that meals were often missed, and clothes were patched over patches. They lived in dark, damp adobe houses, which led to a situation where girls from nearby villages refused to marry into ours, leaving a significant number of bachelors. As a result, an appalling custom emerged among the villagers, exchange marriage, where 2 families would swap their adult children for marriage without love, often leading to tragic domestic outcomes. In the western part of our village lived a 46-year-old bachelor named Walter. Known for his bad character, laziness, and love for gambling and theft, he had been imprisoned years ago due to fights, which led to his parents dying of grief, leaving behind a sister. Though plain in appearance, she was known for her virtues, attracting many young suitors. However, Walter, after his release, denied any marriage prospects for her, setting his malevolent sights on the younger sister of his friend Zach, who lived in the eastern part of the village. Zach, a bachelor in his 30s and similar in demeanor to Walter, was involved with him in various misconducts, making them the most hated men in the village. However, Zach's sister was known for her beauty, drawing numerous suitors, all of whom were turned away by Zach since he fancied Walter's sister. Agreed upon this arrangement, they planned to marry each other's sisters to one another. A saying goes in the countryside, in a family without parents, the eldest brother takes charge. Walter's sister, submissive by nature, followed his arrangements blindly, ready to leap into fire if required. Though Zack had parents, they followed his decisions, not objecting to the marriage. However, Zack's sister vehemently refused to marry Walter. On the day of the arranged marriage, an eager Walter sent his sister to Zack's house and jointly with Zack, they bound Zack's sister's hands and feet, forcibly taking her to Walter's house. No villagers attended their wedding, sorrowfully commenting on how Zack's sister was like a flower stuck in dung. That night, the weather turned harsh with thunderstorms, reflecting the village's mood. Known for her strong will, villagers were concerned for Zack's sister, fearing she would rather break than bend. Walter, drunk with excitement, made a drunken lunge at Zack's sister, who was tied up on the bed. In a desperate fight, she managed to free herself, leaped off the bed, pushed open the door, and ran into the storm. Walter, realizing his mistake, chased after her into the dark, stormy night but lost track of her. The villagers, braving the storm, searched for her throughout the village and the surrounding areas but found no trace. When dawn broke and the storm had passed, a villager went to fetch water from the old well in the east of the village. As they were about to lower the bucket, they were horrified to find a piece of women's clothing floating on the water. It was Zack's sister's familiar red flowered dress. Shaken, the bucket slipped from their hands into the well. When more villagers arrived to draw water, they collectively retrieved Zack's sister's body from the well. Since then, the villagers preferred to fetch water from wells in nearby villages, avoiding the old well altogether. A year later, on the anniversary of Zack's sister's death, a violent storm broke out at night. As the clock neared midnight, Walter's chilling screams pierced the stormy night. "Ghosts, there are ghosts, the ghost is coming, the ghost." His voice faded with the wind and rain, which also began to calm. However, no villagers sought Walter, almost wishing for his expedient demise. Half a month later, a villager walking past that old well smelled the stench of a decomposing body emanating from within. Out of curiosity, he peered into the well and saw a gray shirt floating on the surface. He recognized it as Walter's, but no one was willing to retrieve Walter's body. The old well thus became Walter's grave. On the third anniversary of Zack's sister's passing, another storm raged, with piercing thunder and relentless rain. Just after midnight, villagers heard a series of dreadful cries from the sky, "Sister, my sister is coming, my sister." They all knew it was Zack's voice, but no one was willing to leave their homes to check on him. As dawn began to break, the villagers were awakened by a woman sobbing. The previous night at midnight, Zack had run out of his house in terror, screaming towards the direction of the old well. By the time Zack's wife caught up to the well, he had already jumped in. All she saw was a white specter drifting up from the well before fainting from dizziness by its side. When the wife regained consciousness as dawn approached and the weather had cleared, she ran into the village, crying out and awakening the villagers, claiming that a ghost had dragged her husband into the well and pleading for them to retrieve him. When the villagers pulled Zack out of the well, his eyes were wide with an expression of terror, as if he had witnessed some unspeakable horror before his death. Neither Zack's nor Walter's strange deaths were given much thought by the villagers, nor did anyone believe Zack's wife's claims about a ghost in the old well. She became mentally disturbed afterward, often laughing or crying without reason. Nearly 20 years passed in a blink, and it was during the time when my grandfather was a young man of 30, full of vigor and life. He would often go to the early market to sell salt to eke out a living. One day, around 3:30 in the morning, he got up, yawning and rubbing his sleepy eyes. Guided by the dim moonlight, he shouldered his load of salt and stepped out the door. As my grandfather reached the small dirt road with the old well, he vaguely saw a beautiful girl in a red floral dress sitting beside it. He shivered with fear because when he looked again, no one was there. Could I have been mistaken, he wondered. Yet he bravely approached the well and saw a wet imprint on its edge. It dawned on him that he had truly seen a ghost. He stood frozen in place, overwhelmed with fright. After a while, my grandfather came to his senses and hurried to the market. By the time he arrived, it was already bright, and his fellow salt sellers had already taken the prime spots. Arriving late, grandfather had no choice but to set up his stand in a secluded spot. His peers assumed that his business would suffer, but against all expectations, customers vied with each other to buy his salt, not even haggling over the price. In the time it takes to smoke a cigarette, he sold all the salt he had brought, while other salt merchants had no customers at all. My grandfather was overjoyed. Whenever he recounted this event, he found it astonishing and would often say, "My business in this lifetime will surely thrive, for I have the blessing of a water sprite." Indeed, his business always did well. Despite having seen the ghost in the well, he did not die young. On the contrary, he became the oldest person in the village, living until the age of 93. A few years ago, during a summer, a 5-year-old boy accidentally fell into the old well while playing. It took an hour before the villagers found him. Everyone assumed he would have drowned, since the well was deep and even adults would likely face death if they fell in, let alone a child. Inexplicably, when they pulled him out, he was unscathed. A villager asked him what happened after he fell in, and he said that a girl in a red floral dress held him up in the water, preventing him from sinking. The villagers then realized that it was Zach's sister who had saved his life. There were many in the village who had seen the girl in the red floral dress around the old well and had felt her silent protection. They affectionately called her the water sprite and would offer their prayers and worship at the well on significant days. Only those like Walter and Zach, evildoers, feared the old well, dreading that the water sprite might pull them into its depths. "Oh, it's so cold. Where are we?" Mona complained, carrying a large travel bag on her back. "I don't know, it seems like we've gotten lost." Ezra surveyed the surroundings. A dark forest lay before them, a river cutting off their connection to the opposite bank, and a dampness in the air after the rain. "Someone's over there. Let's ask them." "Excuse me, do you know where we are?" "We're trying to get to Harbor City but got lost." Mona asked with her charm that could disarm seconds, only to be coldly interrupted by the person. "What Harbor City? I have no idea where Harbor City is. This is Gleamville." "But, night's falling. Once it's completely dark, you'll find it hard to say. You'd better find a place to stay while you can still see." The person walked away without looking back, soon disappearing into the fog. What an attitude. Mona was upset. But that person was right, we should find a place to stay. "Look. There's a guest house over there, let's check it out." Ezra pulled Mona towards the small guest house. "Phew, finding a place to stay in the middle of the night, we're pretty lucky. Let's just make do for tonight. Tomorrow we'll set off." "Oh, I'm thirsty, Ezra, go get me some water, will you?" Mona cooed. "It's always like this, such a hassle. Here, give me the water bottle." Ezra left with a, "I can't with you," expression. After Ezra left, Mona started looking around the shabby, old-fashioned room. 2 wooden bedside tables, a black and white TV that only displayed a blank screen when turned on, an old wardrobe making creaking noises, and a floor-to-ceiling window. So boring, how unlucky to be stuck in such a place, really, sigh. At that moment, there was a loud knocking at the door, so loud one might think someone was kicking the door. Mona hurried to open it, thinking it was Ezra returning quickly. "I'm coming, what's the hurry?" "Really?" Mona opened the door without thinking, but it wasn't Ezra at the door. Instead, it was a girl about 3 years old, with the most common ponytail and lifeless big eyes. "Whoa! You scared me." "Oh dear, little girl, what are you doing here?" Mona was startled. "Looking for mommy, gone, teddy bear is gone." "I want teddy bear." The little girl murmured as if talking to herself. "All right, big sister will help you find your mommy. Come, hold my hand." Mona closed the door behind her and led the little girl into the depths of the corridor. how could this happen, they must be so worried about losing you. After walking for 10 minutes, Mona still hadn't reached the place the little girl talked about. Mona was getting anxious. Just as she was at a loss, the little girl suddenly became excited and started running ahead, muttering, "Teddy bear, this is my teddy bear." Mona was puzzled, she hadn't seen anything at all. Just as she was about to call the little girl back, she found that the little girl had completely disappeared. Normally, Mona would have been relieved of her duty and allowed to return, but she was compelled to continue her pursuit. However, a single chase led her to become completely lost herself. Oh my God! Where am I? This wasn't the way I came. Mona ventured down the path she thought she'd taken, only to realize it wasn't the same at all. "Hello? Isn't there anyone here?" she muttered despondently. "Ha ha ha, who says there isn't?" An eerie, distant voice floated from behind her. "Who?" She turned quickly, but there was no one there. She began to sense that something was amiss. She backed away. "Who are you?" "Me, who am I?" "Ha ha ha. Who am I?" The more Mona backed away in fear, the closer she came to something soft and foul-smelling behind her. Startled, she looked back and saw a stuffed toy bear piled in the corner. But something was off about the bear, its one eye gouged out and the other wide open, staring straight at her. She gasped and ran to the other side of the corridor. In a panic, she spotted a staircase leading down and bolted down it. Her heart stopped as another voice emerged from behind, the little girl's. "Sister, don't go, I'm so lonely by myself, stay with me, I found Teddy Bear, look look." Mona felt an icy chill on her back and ran down desperately. She looked up and noticed she was on the 4th floor. But darkness engulfed the floor, boundaries were indiscernible, and a cold breeze blew from the depths. Her instinct told her this floor was all wrong. She continued to run downstairs, but the stairs seemed to elongate, and it felt like a century had passed before she reached the next level. "Sister, don't run." Mona's scalp tingled, her feet disobedient. Abruptly, she looked up and found herself on the 5th floor. She looked around, only a small space was visible, the rest of it was spiral stairs, bottomless. "Don't go, sister." The horrifying voice came again. She felt gust after gust of cold wind blowing from behind her. She no longer cared what lay beneath the stairs but continued to race downward. The voice continued to pursue her, the cold wind from behind growing ever fiercer, bone-chilling. Suddenly, she realized something was off with the stairs. It felt as though water was seeping upwards, and the stairs were becoming mushy. She looked down to find beneath her feet a pile of rotting corpses. She could no longer run. As the ghastly voice closed in, she became trapped. Finally, right behind Mona, the voice made itself known. Trembling, she turned around to see the girl, her hair disheveled, her eyes rolled back, her bloodless lips smiling. "Sister, I found you, let's play, look, Teddy Bear is here, let's play together." Mona screamed helplessly. As the frightful face drew closer, she closed her eyes, resigning herself to her fate. Hey, what are you doing?" Mona was shaken awake, her eyes opening to see Ezra's face, a mix of laughter and tears. "What's wrong with you?" "Ezra, is that you? Really you?" Mona was near tears with relief. "Of course, it's me." Ezra replied, exasperated. "Where are we? Did I have a nightmare?" "Silly, we're in Harbor City." "Alright, I'm off to work now, behave yourself." "MHM." After Ezra left, Mona breathed a sigh of relief. She pondered the dream, so vivid it was unbelievable. She decided to look up the village online, a silly decision, considering the village was from her dream, how could it exist in reality? But she was determined to explore this mystery, to make sense of this unsettling dream. She turned on her computer and typed in the name of the village, Gleamville, but instead of the expected blank page, she found this information: Gleamville, a very old village that perished due to a biological weapon during the Second World War, now converted into a cemetery. A shiver ran down Mona's spine as a familiar voice resonated from behind, "Sister, I've found you."